Hello everyone!
Hello!
I'm Toni.
And I'm Tali.
And we are the Lazy Book Lovers. This is a podcast for book lovers who procrastinate about reading with their never-ending TBR piles. And today we were doing sort of book talk, booktube hot takes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the general
which I didn't
theme.
warn you about.
Yeah, I was supposed to have prep time.
Yeah, didn't happen. It's fine.
Life happened, and now I'm improvising my answers. But I feel like we're probably going to have fairly similar opinions. So what I'm going to do is maybe, where it's not obviously an arsehole, I might do a bit of devil's advocate in.
Well, I tried to pick things that are grey.
Okay.
I tried to pick things that I could probably argue both ways.
Okay.
I didn't pick anything that was like
Morally reprehensible.
is audiobook reading. I didn't go for obvious things. I
Okay.
went for things that I thought might have a conversation.
All right.
So let's see.
Okay, because that's my thought was that we'd have quite similar opinions, and that I could maybe do a bit of devil's advocate.
Yeah, I thought both sides as well, just in case. So,
okay, interesting.
We have
All
the same thought process.
Yay! This is why this works.
Right, okay, so the first one,
Mm-hmm.
which I've already hinted at you, some things I've tagged you in on TikTok. Separating the art from the artist.
Oh.
And we're going to specifically do J.K. Rowling. She must not be named. Because obviously the new game has come out, so it's kind of revived this conversation. Do you want me to tell you what I was thinking first? Or do you want
I had
to...
a debate with someone about this recently, so
Okay.
yeah, but you go.
Okay, so because I've looked up various opinions on it, because obviously I have my opinion, but actually I've noticed that I think my opinion, even from when we did a Harry Potter episode, has probably changed a bit. And I think that's the best thing about this kind of stuff, because I do think like there's often no right.
It's nuanced, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that my opinion on whether she herself is a good person is going to change unless she drastically changes as a person. I'm not saying that I'm suddenly thinking, I don't mind that she's a
or
turf.
advocating for what she's saying, or no.
Yeah, but I think so we're going to specifically do about the game, because that's what's come out. So I've looked up a few different people's opinions on it. I didn't look up any people that were anti-trans, because I don't want to hear their opinion. I looked up some
not
people,
relevant to the discussion.
Yeah, I looked up some people that have no opinion either way, and have been. I looked up reviews of the Harry Potter game from people who don't have Harry Potter nostalgia, like never read the books or something, like this kind of stuff. Because obviously,
you did some proper research. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, and I will tell you why I've done the research. I have been internally debating with myself, because the game looks good.
Yep.
It looks like the game I wanted when I used to play the Harry Potter game.
Love letter to the fans.
Yeah. It has all of the new open world stuff. It has all of the stuff in it that I wanted from Harry Potter games. I am fully aware that for me, wanting to play the game is for nostalgia. And according to reviews of people who have never had anything to do with Harry Potter before, the game itself is a good game.
Okay.
So I've had internal debates with myself. Like, that's what I mean. I don't think it's not black and white. Or maybe I'm saying it's not black and white because I want to excuse myself for considering it. But
I think even if we just separate this discussion from J.K. Rowling, there's this thing now of like, if you've got an author who's said one thing controversially in a panel that they shouldn't have said, was a bit silly, and it's suddenly like, well, if you read their books, you know, you're especially on TikTok, you're demonised and cancelled. And it's like, I'm like, I don't know if this is, if we've gone, this is again not with J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling deserves to be held accountable for what she's saying online. But I don't know if we've gone too far the other way in some respects.
And that actually comes into a couple more I have coming up, other takes. But yeah, so because I've always been a firm believer of, especially when people try to cancel people, I cancel loosely because cancelling people isn't a real thing, as we know. That's like made up by right wings. You know, people can get in trouble for stuff they tweeted 20 years ago or whatever. And I'm a firm believer
back then
of,
it wasn't offensive.
Yeah, and you as a person can change your views.
You've been since educated.
Yeah.
As if you were educated and then still using it in the modern world, you
That's
deserve to
an
be held
issue.
accountable.
Yeah.
But if 20 years ago it was a very acceptable thing to say, and since being educated you never said it again.
Yeah. And if it was that long ago and you have since, as a person, proven that that's not actually how you think, I can take or leave an apology as well. Like, because if your actions show that you don't think that way anymore, or never thought that way, but just were trying to be edgy or whatever, I don't care. But, if you want to do an apology and be like, yeah, I'm not that person anymore, or I said something that at the time I thought was funny or whatever, I'm of the opinion that I would usually be like, doesn't matter, forgiven. Like, what you do now is more important.
Especially people about our age we were posting stuff on the internet from the age of about 10.
Yeah, we literally grew up on the internet.
Back when we weren't as educated about what you say on the internet is there forever. We were not taught that. It was just like, it's MySpace.
Yeah.
Silly thing.
I mean, on
and
Facebook, you had your conversations on each other's walls.
Yeah.
It wasn't private.
No, you just post a story about whatever you were thinking at that moment. Yeah. I think our first time we went out for drinks together is because I posted a status saying, anybody free?
Yeah.
I'm feeling too wired from work today. And you were like, yeah, I am. Message me.
And then that was how we hung out.
We just discussed, we've now been friends like 10 years. Yeah. And none of them separate from the friend who was our connecting friend. And it was because I did a Facebook status whinging. Yeah, I don't. So I genuinely live in fear, especially as I used to also post writing online, and I did try and find it all and delete it all, but some of it I don't even have that email address or the password anymore.
Yes.
And it just, I know this stuff exists out there, and it genuinely gives me the fear.
Like
not that I'm ever going to be famous, but I'm just like, there'll be something that I was trying to explore as a teenager. In terms of what I'm thinking about something, that I'll have wrote some kind of story, they'll then get brought up to be like, she believes this.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Or some status that was some lyrics from a song that no one knows about anymore. It's just something silly. Like some stupid kid stuff.
Yeah.
That's something that I have been around 18-year-olds and Gen Z and when they're using their social media, and I remember when I was travelling especially being baffled about how much more cognizant they were about what they were putting online than I was. Like how carefully they thought about everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh.
We grew up in a very different generation of the internet. Like, so bringing this back to the
sorry.
No, that's fine, because that was a good...
It's kind of relevant.
Yeah. So bringing this back round to specifically J.K. Rowling, she's been paid for that game regardless.
Yeah.
You boycotting it doesn't affect her bottom line in terms of this game. What it can do is it can affect the people that have been involved in it in terms of like developers, art directors, programmers, who then may not have the chance to work on a second game if this doesn't have good sales. So you'd actually be hurting them.
Or hurt by association to something that's considered like, advocating the turf.
Yeah. So I can understand some people's arguments that are like, well, if I buy this game, it doesn't affect her anyway because she's already been paid. And I've had this argument with myself before to justify buying. I wanted the Mina Lima one back before I really kind of did cut ties with her. And I was like, if I buy it from Costco, it doesn't matter because they kind of buy it in bulk and blah, blah, blah. So I justified it to myself.
But just in general, separating art from the artist, there's this whole argument called the death of the author. Yeah. So the moment that book is out there, it is a separate thing. The author dies at that point. Quote marks.
Yeah, because
I'm not advocating. I'm not saying like kill J.K. Rowling. Yeah. I'm saying as in metaphorically, the author is dead at that point. So whatever they're tweeting, whatever they're saying in panels or discussions of like, well, actually, this was the undertone I wanted there, or like that. No, what dies at that point. And it's now in the property of the fans. Yeah. And there's that whole argument as well.
But I've also, when I was looking into this, I looked up, I came across someone who actually said that that definition of the death of the author is actually wrong.
Oh, okay.
But this is just one person's opinion, and I liked their opinion. They said the death of the author should literally be when the author dies and they can no longer do harm. So you're talking about like Lovecraft, who you can't read his work without it being extremely racist, because he was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
However, he cannot do harm anymore.
Yeah.
So that was just what she was saying. She
Yeah.
believes Death of the Author should actually be, because it's someone that can't harm anymore. So, like...
Can you imagine if those people had Twitter?
Yeah, exactly.
Just because their letters were private correspondence.
He literally named his cat an extremely racist word. It's just... So, and you can say it's separated from the artist, but they are inherently written into it.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, obviously, now that people have brought it to my attention, me as an 11-year-old, I couldn't understand the nuance of Harry Potter. But now, if I reread it, I can see like the kind of anti-Semitism written into it and all of that kind of stuff that I would never have picked up as a child.
Even sort of the feminist elements of the book, which I used to really
like,
crow about,
champion, yeah,
because it's still all her women do end up married and pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and the ones that don't are bad; they're evil.
All the ones who are good are married women in straight relationships, and all the ones that are bad are the ones who have no kids and are horrible to children.
Yeah,
and like obviously Molly Weasley was supposed to be this whole thing of this motherly, feminine strength, but she still has that badass moment at the end where there's the big fight, and she says, "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Like that's meant to be like that motherly, like aggressively motherly love and the power of that. And again, it's a very 90s feminism stance, but she didn't write these in the 90s.
Yeah. And as a person, she is the icon of 90s feminism.
Yeah. Which is why it's trans exclusionary.
Yeah.
Because it is a very narrow definition of womanhood.
Yeah, and it's also very only caring about white women who already have more privilege than other women. Mm-hmm. You know, like if you...
Yeah. And
this one, there's no right or wrong. So in terms of this game, I've seen arguments either way. I've seen people say if you really care, you shouldn't buy the game, but then the money that you would have spent on the game, you should donate to a charity for trans children or whatever. There's been streamers that all the money they have earned from streaming the game are donating it to trans charities. Yeah. So yes, they have bought the game. Yes, they're bringing attention to the game, but they're also donating more money to trans charities than they would have otherwise, and brought awareness to those charities.
I definitely went through like this mourning period of like where Harry Potter lost what it meant to me because of her. Yeah. Because of her behaviour. Because then I'm like, oh, I can't love this anymore. Yeah. Like I used to reread them like every couple years. And I haven't
I used to reread them every year.
I haven't read them in like probably maybe longer. For me, probably 5 years or more for me. And like, I straight up have a Deathly Hallows tattoo. You guys can't see me. I do have a Deathly Hallows tattoo, but it's because her books is what made me want to be a writer when I was a kid. And like, there was a whole documentary, I think I've talked about this before, where she goes into the home where she was depressed, and her book got rejected 17 times while she was living there, and in her old bedroom is all books. I know now that was set up. Yeah. Obviously that was staged. She walks into her old bedroom, on the bookshelf is all her books, pristine, lined up. Like, that was staged. But at that time, that moment was like goosebumps of like, oh my god, that could be me!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like the whole narrative of her as well is very twisted, because yes, she had it rejected so many times, but she was also from a privileged family. She could afford to not work to write her books.
Yeah, this kind of...
She wasn't a struggling mum like they make out.
Yeah, this struggling single mum living on the breadline.
Yeah, with a lot of handouts from her parents.
Yeah, and like taking that time to write and not work. And
that's a very privileged position.
Because if you were a single mum and you weren't able to feed your kids, you would choose to work, wouldn't you? Rather than... instead of writing a book. Yeah.
But then, on the other hand, I don't know how many hands I'm on now. There's also the fact that the Fantastic Beasts franchise was meant to be 5 films and has been cancelled after 3 because of how low, like how little money they're bringing in. And so that does prove that boycotting to a certain extent does help. But you don't know whether that was...
progressively shitter as stories.
Yeah, so they were screenwritten by J.K. Rowling, who is not a screenwriter, so it was terrible. They lost Johnny Depp, so there was loads of like controversy about that. It wasn't about Fantastic Beasts, it was about a relationship that wasn't a relationship, but it's only a relationship
Because
off page.
Disney still can't openly say that Dumbledore is gay.
Yeah. I think I tagged you in this video where someone was saying about, well, you know, you can't get angry at people that want to buy the game if you're not actually getting angry. You're not going to like the Warner Studio, the Harry Potter store and getting angry at people there, or there's so many. There's no right or wrong, I don't think.
No, I don't know what the right answer is,
No.
and I don't think you should be vilified one way or the other.
No,
unless you're saying I support this because of her views, and then you're wrong.
If you are saying I agree with her views,
and therefore I'm going to spend more money on her,
you are wrong, and I will tell you why you're wrong. It's because you would be actively fighting against taking away people's human rights, so you're wrong regardless. Like you just that's not an opinion. That is taking away, what are you, the Conservative government? You can't take away people's human rights.
To do with their own bodies what they will.
Yeah. And it is undeniable that celebrities such as J.K. Rowling is the reason why there's been a rise in transphobia in the UK. The Conservative government are currently going after them again to take away even more rights. A child was recently murdered as a hate crime because she was trans. Like, the damage she has done is still there in society.
Because obviously I monitor Twitter for my work, and the number of times the hashtag JK Rowling is trending, and it says trending in the UK, and then I click on it and I'm hoping it's because like something's happened as in a call out, but no, it's people. She's done some interview somewhere, and it's somehow been trending, and every single comment is vile. Like, most of them are in support of her.
It's the same with, like, Trump. You know, if you give people permission to vocalise these things, they will.
But that's freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from repercussions.
Yeah. And I think because she is such a well-known person, she is a well-known person, she was a well-loved person at one point, and obviously her series of Harry Potter made a big impact
it
for
saved
lots of
the
people.
publishing industry.
Yeah.
Really? Until she is the biggest event besides Book Talk to save the publishing industry, especially children's books.
But so when she is vocal about these kind of views, it gives other people permission to be vocal about them. And but
I don't know if playing some silly game, does that mean you're in support of that? No, I don't know.
No. Like, if I were to buy the game and play it, I still support trans rights. But would someone who falls under the trans umbrella feel that I wasn't because they saw me playing that game? And they would be like,
worry about that with my tattoo.
Yeah. And they'd be like, I saw something on Instagram today, like a graphic, and it said, trans people are more important than a made up wizard or something like that. And I was like, if I was under the, I mean, technically I fall under the not trans umbrella, but I'm under like the queer umbrella with trans people, but I'm not trans, I'm not MB, I'm not anything. What that's like. Would I find it offensive that someone was playing the game even though they supported, perhaps, like, you know, they gave money to trans charities, they were vocal about it, they tried to educate people that they met in public, but does that all get cancelled out?
Like, why are we, like, again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with this, it's just like a devil advocate kind of opinions.
I'm just talking.
Like, why are we placing so much morality on what is a fucking game where you're a wizard?
Yeah.
Like, why is that a discussion of morality?
If it didn't have the Harry Potter name attached to it, this conversation wouldn't be happening.
Like, why am I a better or worse person for wanting to play a game? Like, again, devil's advocate kind of thing.
Yeah. So
because I fear as well that, like, there can be books that I love now and openly talk about online that, I don't know, say the podcast takes off, and in 10 years' time, like, in the imaginary future where we're famous,
I mean,
could that be like, oh, she said she really likes Sarah J Maas, and then Sarah J Maas tweeted this 5 years later.
100%, because we have spoken about Sarah J Maas. Yeah. We do try to mention, obviously, some issues with her, but because we've spoken about that, 100%, that is going to be a reason that some people have decided our podcast is not for them.
Yeah.
That's why I picked these topics. I tried to pick ones that we can have a discussion on that don't have a right or wrong. Like, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I'm going to feel Like, I'm going to feel FOMO for missing out on a game that looks really fun and technically is supposed to be great. But would I feel guilty if I got in and played it and the whole time I might feel a bit guilty? And I can't even keep it a secret because it would be up on my PlayStation Store.
If it was like given to you for free, then you didn't spend the money.
But like, you know, my Harry Potter books, I used to have them proudly displayed. Then I moved to the top of the shelf. Then they've moved to my bedroom bookshelf.
Mine aren't even on.
And now they're at the top of my bedroom bookshelf. Yeah, like, you can't see them. But I know they're there.
I used to have them, and then remember I used to have the Harry Potter jewellery I have dangling, like, displayed.
Yeah. And, like, I've got wands, which I love. And they're displayed in my room and in my living room. And my partner bought me a fancy display to put them on when we first got together. And... They have sentimental stuff.
Sometimes I'm mad at J.K. Rowling for taking this thing that I loved and making it something that I can't love or I'm not supposed to love or is tainted.
She's tainted it.
She's tainted it. I don't know how else to put it.
She's tainted all my memories of it.
Yeah.
She's tainted, like... Yeah.
Because then you can't help when you sort of reflect on Harry Potter, you can't help finding other things wrong. You know, there are other things besides... I mean, you can argue that her opinions on trans people aren't written into the book. Besides the feminism aspects.
Wouldn't Tonks be trans?
I don't know.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Because she can transform her body, so technically she could have any body part she wanted.
And
that is a very...
And she has a very...
gender-neutral name.
And she has a very depressing ending.
I don't know, it's really complicated. I genuinely, I've debated this with someone recently and I couldn't find, there's no, I don't think there's any clear-cut answer.
I mean, I do feel that the books, looking back on them, obviously they were a big deal for people, especially in the queer community, because it felt like an accepting. Mm-hmm. It was like a comfort place. It was about acceptance.
Yes.
However, when you look back at it, there are no queer characters. There's not
named
really,
that way anyway.
There's not really many queer coded characters outside of fan fiction.
But also you've got to frame it. It was written in the 90s,
yes,
and it was incredibly progressive for the 90s in some respects. In a lot, it wasn't. I'm not saying that, but in some respects, it was. Having a female heroine character, even if she was paired with two male heroes, and she gets married off and has babies at the end. Just the fact that the main character was, like, you had Hermione, who's a smart girl, a bossy girl, and having her as a main character was a big deal in the 90s.
Yeah.
And having a lot of her female heroines, even though they end up being women who are married and babies, you know, having, a mother be a heroine in this story. Harry's mother, who is, you know, also what's the woman in the fridge thing?
I think it's the woman in the fridge. I think that's literally what it's called.
But who's literally like the driving force behind the entire plot by why Harry who is who he is.
Yeah. So the woman that gets killed off.
Yeah.
To progress the male character or progress the storyline.
But she is the hero in some respects in the end, and because it's sacrifice, it's sacrificial love that has how Harry saves everyone.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No.
Don't know.
No. And the only place where she apparently tried is something that she mentioned not on page at any point about Dumbledore being gay. And then she wrote the screenplays for Fantastic Beasts, all Dumbledore in it, and he's not. So where do your loyalties
There's an interview of her with Daniel Radcliffe where she's saying that he's gay, and in her head she was always gay. It doesn't need to be mentioned.
Which I can understand, but then...
She would not have got published in the 90s if she had mentioned it.
But then when you come to, like, writing a new series based on him and the person he was supposedly loved...
Yeah.
Where is it?
It's alright saying, I published in the 90s and I couldn't have had an openly gay character, but I tried to write it in and have representation as much as I could. You could couch it in that, but then to go and write something new in the modern era and then ignore it after having given interview after interview after interview where you're saying, he's coded that way. I always meant it that way. The Hollywood foreign press made such a big deal about it, but he always was. I don't say Dumbledore is still Dumbledore. And then to write something new...
when she didn't even have to do Dumbledore and Grindelwald's story, because it's supposed to be Fantastic Beasts, for fuck's sake. It's supposed to just be Newt finding good animals.
Yeah.
That's another reason why all the books failed. The films failed.
Well, no one wanted, like, a political breakdown of...
You shouldn't have called it Fantastic Beasts. You should have just called it The Wizarding World. But you called it Fantastic Beasts, so it should have just been Cool Beasts.
Yeah.
I'm just getting angry.
Or Newt's story.
Yeah.
Like, I would have happily done Newt Scamander's life story. Bam, done.
Yeah.
With, like, a little, like, a news article about this in the background.
Yeah. Like, it would have been cool if each film was him just going to a different country in the world to try and find those beasts. And perhaps you hear people discussing in the pub, like, oh, have you heard Grindelwald's done this again? And he's just like...
Or you could even, like, the beasts, the animals could be used metaphorically in the politics of the time.
So...
Oh, we are right. We're probably done. We've done nearly half an hour.
I don't think the rest will take as long.
But I think this is, it's a big topic if you're in this sphere of the world.
So this one's kind of similar, but not really. No, so this is like, the question I wrote down is using real life experiences as inspiration in your books, right or wrong. Let me give you where this came from. So I've mentioned before the book The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Hughes. I think that's what it's called. Might be wrong. I can't bother to look him up. T.J. Clune. I've mentioned before that I really loved that book. And then afterwards there was some talk about him. And I said that he was getting, like, not cancelled, because again, cancelling isn't a real thing. He was getting pretend cancelled because of something. And I said to you that the group of people who should be offended, I hadn't heard anyone from that group talk about it. And that was all I'd mentioned to you. I don't think I went into details about what it was. So in an interview after The House in the Cerulean Sea came out, he said that he got the inspiration for it from the residential schools in Canada that have obviously recently been, or at the time of that book, had recently been in the news because a lot of the mass graves were being discovered. Okay, so the residential schools are where they used to send Indigenous peoples from Canada, basically train them out of
indoctrinated,
and train to be white, basically.
But the quote was beat the Indian out of them. Yeah, so that was the aim of the school.
That they didn't know by the time they left this school, even if they'd tried to go back to their tribe or their family or whatever, they couldn't even speak the same language anymore. They were
do that
Christian.
in Anne of the Green Gables.
Yes.
The one of the latest series that gets explored.
Yeah.
Because Anne makes friends with an Indigenous girl that gets sent away.
So a lot of people were angry, saying that he shouldn't be using that as inspiration for his book.
But is it to explore the themes of it? Because that gets, again, like we talked about Red Rising, which was all about eugenics and slavery.
That was last week's episode.
Yeah, that was a recent read. That is using real world things that people really did.
Yeah.
And taking them and putting them in a dystopian, they're on Mars, but it is taking real world political things that were done and have been done.
Yeah.
To justify brutal acts.
Is it because
it's a way of holding up I think it's a very good way of holding up a mirror against society, in my opinion. But I'm not of these groups.
Yeah, like, is everyone more offended because it's a recent thing, you know? It's like, it's a recent
hopping on the trend to make money.
Well,
which is not why I'm saying this author did.
Yeah, no, yeah, I know you're
but
not.
But could be accused.
There's people that are alive now that actually have experience from these residential schools, because they only finished in like the 90s or something in Canada. So is it that it's too raw to be saying that's an inspiration for your cozy fantasy book? Is that where people were so angry? Like, if it had happened, if he was writing about something that happened 40, 50 years ago, would people be a bit more accepting that he'd use that as inspiration? Do you see what I mean? Like, why did this one particularly make people angry when there's loads of stuff that, I mean, even Harry Potter, for instance, it's clearly got like a Nazi.
Well, she openly said, because she actually worked for a refugee charity, so she deliberately makes Voldemort a tyrant.
Yeah,
and that's that quote from Dumbledore where he's like, he fears what all tyrants fear. that is also the reason in the books, not the film, in the books, when he dies, he has a human body.
Because all he is a human.
That he's human at the end of the day. And they also treat his body respectfully, unlike how he treats Harry's body. But the whole point is that all tyrants can die. That's the point. All tyrants are human. That was meant to be the point of it. But those themes are heavily based on... I mean, if she was in the 90s, that would have been to do with what was going on in Serbia, in Bosnia, in all those countries, you know.
Yeah.
Croatia, that whole...
So, I don't know, as I said when I briefly mentioned this in a wrap-up ages ago, I'm not an Indigenous person.
Yeah.
I can't comment on this. I'm trying to get my head around it so that I can understand
I
understand where other people come in. I have not heard any Indigenous people speak on this, so as I said, I don't know. Like, if he had said it was inspired by that and he's going to make a donation to a charity,
but why
would that make it okay?
Him?
I don't know. Yeah, like, why? I just think there's a lot of authors that use inspiration in real life events, so why was this one a particular thing that made people angry? That's what I want to understand.
Because I think people were... Because this is a recent, like you said, but also this is... I'm trying to think of my thoughts.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're like all good things to try and think about, but...
This is something that Canadian people and American people, where these things also happened, and then also this is British colonies. This is a source of shame.
Yeah,
this is something we well, I'm using the royal we here, a collective we, are ashamed of. This is a sin that is not resolved, never been apologised for. This is a sin by the church that has never been apologised for, and so that's why I think people were so quick to be screaming into the wind, because it's to say, I'm not this though. Separate me from my ancestors who were really just 50 years ago, the generation before me. I'm not one of them. I might be a Christian, but I think this is disgraceful, and I'm going to dox some guy online who wrote a book that is examining these themes in not in a disrespectful way. I haven't read the book, obviously.
Maybe
it's responding to that emotive thing of, like, I feel some shame about this.
Yeah. Like, maybe you could say that, maybe some people could claim he's trivialised it because he turns it into, he has said it's his inspiration for a cute little cosy romance. But I don't know. As I said, I understand, but I don't understand at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to know why that author and that book in particular had so much hatred. And maybe it's just the accumulation of, like, the perfect storm of it had recently happened, and the country of...
BookTok moves so fast.
Yeah, the country of Africa has... the country of Canada still has not paid reparations to these communities that were destroyed by these schools and stuff. I'm not saying Canada's the only one. Obviously, there's a lot of countries that need, but we're discussing Canada in particular at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you be inspired by events? Surely, yes, because otherwise, if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. And
perhaps by bringing it into fictional stories and films and art, etc., it helps keep it in people's minds. It helps make it more palatable for people, makes it easier for people to understand. I don't know. But surely everything's inspired by something.
I don't know. I like, because fantasies will often take quite disgusting things that have happened in history, but set it in a world that has, like, dragons and wizards or whatever, or dragons and fairies. But like there'll be mentions of a genocide, and that is obviously happened repeatedly throughout history. There's lots of times when it's done, like, I don't know, different fae races in these books have different rights.
Yeah.
And that is very much like, just a pseudonym for... Yeah, that is just a pseudonym for the racial differences and racial equality differences. So,
I mean, surely these things do still need to be discussed.
mm-hmm.
There's literally, like, this is not gone.
No.
Even in our country where we supposedly are forward thinking, we have people being happy that human beings are drowning on the way over here and referring to them as rats. They're human beings that are looking for a better home. So these things do need to be mentioned more.
And I think you could, someone who might hold prejudiced opinions will pick up a silly fantasy book where it's examining this particular aspect of society, but in the context of fairies and wizards.
Yeah.
And make them think, and then if they're angry, like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, how dare they? I think it could help that person, if you were to sit them down and argue with them about these are human beings that have rights, they're going to be like, well, no, I believe what I believe.
Yeah.
They're not going to listen to you, but if they're reading a fantasy narrative from the point of view of the oppressed person, and they are mad and it sparks an emotion, I think that is more likely to change someone's opinion. I genuinely believe that is more likely to change someone's opinion than if you sit them down and present them with an argument. A reasoned argument with all the facts.
Yeah.
In a very cold, clinical. I don't know. I think you can kind of hear which side of it. If you're doing it respectfully, you know, within reason, I don't think I could ever confidently write one of these narratives trying to get inside the head of being an oppressed person in terms of, like, racially or anything like that. Because I would never feel comfortable to write that myself. But yeah.
Speaking of which, next on my list,
so
can a white author write other peoples of colour, write characters that are of colour, different diverse characters?
I think
it's just silent because
I think it can be done well. I don't think that as a result white authors should be put off of not including diverse characters in their books because they're afraid of writing them wrong. Mm-hmm. Like, I think if you're saying, white people can't write characters of a different diversity, it might then mean white authors don't have diversity in their books.
Yeah. And traditionally, white authors are more likely to be published, and that is where we've had thousands of years of issues with, well, not thousands, with books that are traditionally published being very white focused. Mm-hmm. I think it really depends on how you come at it. Mm-hmm. If you are not using a person of colour as a stereotype, as a scapegoat, as like the bad person or whatever, I think you do it personally, but I'm not of a
one of the
group
most beautiful books I've
underrepresented.
ever read was Tiny Sunbirds Far Away. That is set in, I believe, in Nigerian village, but don't quote me on it because I read it 8 years ago. For a quick anecdote, we're not going to research. And it's a girl who moves into a rural Nigerian village where her grandmother is a midwife who performs FGM, but she and her grandmother argues that I will do it safely, whereas they'll go to someone else who won't. And the granddaughter is horrified by this, and she becomes a midwife but decides to approach. So it examines a lot of those cultural aspects, a lot of those feminist aspects, and it is written by a white author, but it's so beautifully well done.
It's the intent.
Yeah, and it's highlighting a very big issue.
Yeah. And
she was a small, like, she's this woman is someone my mother knows, like, friend mother knows, like, whatever. No, I don't think it's indie published, but do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's not really an argument either way, but, like, that's an example I can think of where I thought, but, and again, as a white person who's not Nigerian, I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. I think, this might contrast to what you've just said. I think, like, if you're not trying to write from the experience of an oppressed real-life minority, so, like, we have own voices for a reason. Mm-hmm. They don't get picked up and published very often. but they would surely be able to go into the nuances of the story better. So I think you shouldn't be put off including other diverse characters, but you
couldn't write from the experience inside it.
Exactly.
Authentically.
Yeah.
Unless you're putting the burden on someone who's from that oppressed group to feed you the feelings.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different another thing.
And this is also why beta readers and sensitivity readers are very important for authors, which I think traditionally published authors tend to not do.
I'm always like that opinion, like the burden of education falls on you, not on the person that represents that group.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, it's not your job to teach me, it's my job to go away and teach myself of what is the right way and wrong way to talk about this. So, yeah.
This also extends to, like, disabilities and stuff as well, just
oppressed is like a...
Yeah.
People who don't, they tend to...
Because I phrase it as people of colour, but also... anyone in the diverse scale, that's basically anyone that's not like a white majority, is what I'm saying, an able-bodied white majority. But like, because I'm thinking, for instance, if I wanted to write a book and I wanted to have a character with OCD in it, I would locate a beta reader with OCD and pay them for their time to read it and give me feedback.
Yeah.
That's where I think the baseline should be.
Yeah.
We should be doing things like that.
Yeah.
So this one I don't think is so morally grey, but
I think it has huge potential to go badly.
Yeah.
But I hesitate for the idea of like stories not getting told as a result.
Yeah.
But then we should be working towards a society where the people, those own voices, get to tell them, get published, because they should be.
Yeah. And obviously me and Tony are well aware that we are coming out.
We are white, middle class.
A white, middle class, point of view. And we are both always continually learning and educating ourselves. But, yeah, I don't know. And especially, like, if you're writing a fantasy book, if you're writing about dragons or aliens, like a sci-fi book, anything like that, and you don't have diversity, I'm confused.
There's no excuse.
Yeah,
in that scenario, there is no excuse.
No, I'm so confused.
Because you'll have a dialect specific to your fantasy world. Mm-hmm. So therefore you don't need to know how to write the dialect for, if you're for a specific race, as an example.
Yeah.
Not that they're not erasure or anything, you know what I mean? Like, you're putting this in this other world. Or if it's a world where racism doesn't exist, then therefore... If it's canon in your world that everybody is just like, humans are all equal because they're above fairies in some way or below, then there's no excuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have to remember that a lot of the stuff in our society, like racism and stuff like that, is all due to religion.
Yes.
And perhaps in a better world, there is no religion.
Or if you have a world that doesn't have a monarchy, you're not going to have the class system that we have.
Yeah.
And that is going to dictate, because obviously class and race, are, especially in the UK, are very interlocked.
Yeah.
And the class system, is very structured. Mm-hmm. So...
Yeah, that's why we like a bit of inbreeding, to keep it that way.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
That was funny, but it threw the thought.
Sorry.
But I'm like, so if you have a society without those class structures, because they're not a monarchy, then they might not have racial differences. There might be something else, a power structure. Mm-hmm. There'll be different power structures.
Yes, exactly. Like, when you discussed the gilded ones, that was to do with blood colour, wasn't it?
Yeah, so you had some women have golden blood.
Yeah.
And because they are more powerful and stronger than people who don't have golden blood, they then were made to be demons.
Yeah.
And seen as lesser than and treated like dogs.
Yeah, exactly. So overall, I think it's down to intention. I don't think you should avoid it. The world, especially like our world, and any worlds you come up with, are diverse.
Yeah.
And your book should reflect that.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say, really. And you should reach out and pay people for their time.
Mm-hmm.
For sensitivity reading things.
Yeah. That's another one. There's no clear cut, yes or no. You did good.
I was trying.
I'm very impressed.
I wanted us to be able to discuss rather than just be like, I think this.
Because I think there's somewhere you and I would just both be like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this one is actually kind of related. They're all very, I don't know if they're hot takes actually, but they're quite hot button topics.
Yeah.
This one is, okay, you know, like, there's very big problematic author lists now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is fine, obviously. We should be spreading awareness of this. And with Book Talk in particular, it's made a great platform for people who are in the offended group or whatever to vocalise why and explain and educate those that may not know otherwise. Whereas before you would probably have to go looking for it yourself.
Yeah.
You know, look up this author, is this author controversial?
Yeah.
Now you can just find it very easily on Book Talk. A lot of people on those lists are on those lists because they don't have diverse characters. So is lack of diversity in itself problematic, or have we lost sight of what the term problematic means? Because I think it's foolish. For me, problematic would be someone that's perhaps actively causing harm by their representation. By just not having that representation, it's not great writing, but is it by association problematic?
I don't think it deserves to be lumped with authors who are causing harm.
Yeah.
I don't think it deserves to be lumped in that category and like boycotted as a result. It might be like as a
lumping them together.
Yeah, I think it could be taken as a learning moment. If this is an author who's actively publishing, it's a moment of like, hey, I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah,
because I think if you come, and this is not an excuse, but if you are writing about, say, a tiny British village, which probably doesn't have a lot of diversity, and you are from that world, who also never...
Someone who lives in a tiny British village, I can attest to the lack of diversity.
And that, but say if that's the only thing you ever knew. Yeah. You grew up in this tiny white village, you only know white people, and all that you know
like an episode of Midsummer Murders.
Yeah, and the only thing you know of other cultures is what you've seen on TV, and if you went into London, like for a day trip.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Then I
know the exact vibe you're talking about, yeah.
Then I think it could almost be like, not excused, I do not think this is an excuse, but you could almost forget to add it. If your story is going to be about this white village, you're not going to think how important it is, because it is important to add that diversity in.
Yeah.
You're not going to think that because you're like, this is my world. This is not, again, I'm not saying this is okay.
If you're just like trying to replicate your lived experience of a small village that doesn't have diversity.
Yeah. It's not done with malicious intent. But again, in the modern era, you can argue that's not an excuse either. I come in at it from, I tried to write a story and I realised I'd only written white characters and I was like, hold on.
Yeah. But you took that time to
took that time to think about it.
Yeah.
And rewrote.
So you're actually one of the authors we are discussing in that...
Unpublished, obviously.
You are writing diversity into your book.
Because,
because you should do.
Because that's real life.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had this moment of reflection of like, this is not representing real life. This is the, I don't know, tiny microsphere that I conjured in my brain.
Yeah.
But then also only reading fantasy books at the time that only included white characters. So my picture of a fantasy book is very narrow. And then since I have read more widely, that picture is not as narrow as it once was.
Also bearing in mind that Toni started this when she was like a teenager.
Oh
right?
Yeah, I did start this when I was like 14.
Yeah, so... Obviously, education in terms of, like, the world.
Well, I'm not picturing a fantasy vampire book. I'm sorry, that's like Bella, Twilight.
Yeah, exactly.
Ghostly white people.
Yeah.
That sparkle in the sun.
Yeah.
As I currently do, because I'm so pale. That's that. I feel like that's one of the clips that'll get used against me in like 10 years' time.
Just a little side note. You know that lady on TikTok who does the Twilight stuff?
Yeah.
That brilliant lady. She mentions that the fact that because they have lips like marble,
it would sound like
kids.
Porcelain.
Yeah, and I love it.
So she was saying, this is totally derailing this topic.
Yeah,
wait, where's my cup?
Yeah.
She was saying, this is the sound of them doing it in Twilight.
And then she actually did a click through with that sound. Love it. Sorry, but that's just the mental Twilight movie.
Totally derailed a very serious discussion there. So I don't know. I don't think they authors like that deserve to be chucked in the same class as ones who wrote deliberately harmful materials.
We have a crinkly book, by the way. I apologise.
You know what, guys? It's either you hear her
talking or crinkling.
Crinkling. This is our compromise. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think they deserve to be put on the same lists. They do deserve to be noted and held accountable for having not thought about that and not making it represent real life.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's by default problematic.
No.
Because they're not doing harm. But perhaps if they are not rectifying it 10 books down the line, then we can look at... Maybe it is verging on problematic, because whilst you're not doing harm, you're also not representing anything real.
Yeah.
As I said, I tried to go for things that I don't think have a yes or a no.
Yeah.
Right. 2 more, and I think that these are going to be quick ones.
I want to acknowledge again that whole discussion was done as white middle class women.
Yeah.
So, but again, our views are from our lived experiences, but we're always trying to learn.
And what we like to read. Should more YA books stay as standalones? Because it feels as though a lot of them were written as standalones and then extended into usually trilogies. What do we think? I don't think this is... I mean, it's not on par with the rest of the discussions. I just thought it was a fun little discussion. So.
Yes. I think there are more than a few books, where you, especially when they're traditionally published, where you can tell you're just there like, this could have been one book, maybe one big book, but you have longed this out, had to make some kind of cliffhanger ending, had to introduce a third act for no reason at the end of a book. Most of the second book is rectifying the big climax that they did at the end of the first book and then ratcheting it back up again for a big ending. I think you can really, really tell when that's been done.
I think sometimes you can really lose the characters as well, because you might have to do like a bit of a 180 on the character, or have something come out of the blue that have them do something bad, and then they have to go on like a journey, and I just did journey with quote marks there. I think you can really, really tell when they've like deliberately trashed a character's arc just to create a bit of tension, or I think there's some things that they don't need to be trilogies, they could be duologies. There's duologies that could just be one book. There's a lot of discussion, because I looked up like what's the ideal length for a fantasy story. There's a lot of opinions about that, and I didn't get a clear-cut answer. It's very much like subjective and dependent on the story, I guess.
And then one of them was like, oh, you can get away with this kind of big book if you're a big author, but don't do it as a newbie author. You'd have to split it, is what it was saying.
Like Samantha Shannon, who has a standalone book that's 800 pages?
Yeah. That like broke BookTok for a while. That's prior to the Orange Tree.
And her new book, that's a prequel, technically it is a series now, but they are 2 standalone books in the same world, is also bigger.
Yeah. And she even did a TikTok, didn't she, where she was like, when you're well known for being the debut author with a really long book.
Yeah. And she said she deliberately wanted to just have a standalone, and she kept creating a bigger world, but she wasn't going to break it into more books. She wanted a standalone.
Like, because I think my one could maybe be 2, but I don't want that.
Because I think, although, like, if you set out at the beginning to be like, right, I want this to be a trilogy, first of all, I'm not quite sure why you would be like, I want to write a trilogy, unless you're thinking of to sell more books, or you're trying to hit a contract, then you can sort of obviously plan it out that way. But, if you've written one book, or you've almost finished one book, and then your publisher turns around and is like, actually, we want this to be a trilogy, you can really tell.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm trying to think. I'm sure I could have examples, but I can't really think of them right now. And we're just staring at my bookshelves.
I'm just going to say ACOTAR, because the first one could have been a standalone. I know there is discussions of her foreshadowing and stuff, but it could have been a standalone.
Or that whole prequel story didn't need to be as long, because it is essentially a prequel to ACOTAR. You could also ACOMAF. the second book. You could argue that whole book is a prequel.
And bearing in mind, in ACOTAR, the best part is Under the Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they could have shortened the rest of that
Like,
out.
where that is like, what, 40% of the book? And
Yeah.
60% of it is like, oh, I went to his nice house and he tried to seduce me.
A dress.
We're trying to justify me falling in love with the man that kidnaps me, who's horrible to me.
Yeah.
And then use that as justification for me going under the mountain and nearly dying for him. Spoilers.
Out of the blue.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cases of it, and I think it tends to happen more in YA than in adult. And I'm wondering if that is also anything to do with the fact that female authors tend to be lumped into YA as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's some sort of element there, but because, you know, like Sarah J Maas, her books are not YA.
No.
Well, at least ACOTAR isn't. I haven't read Thrown a Glass.
Sex in ACOTAR. Like the first book alone. But yeah.
And it gets lumped into
Thrown
YA
a Glass,
because it's a female author, basically.
Thrown a Glass, halfway through the series, it switches over. So it's fade to black in the beginning, and then it changes over.
Yeah. So I do wonder if perhaps there's an element of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe male authors feel more confident to be like, no. Whereas female authors might be a bit like, yeah, I guess I could make her some more books.
They're like, you know, you're going to get this type of female audience and they love series and, you know.
Or, you know, it'd be hard to market loads of standalone books, so make it a series and then... Yeah, I don't know. That's not really there's no answer for that, really.
Yeah.
This last one, and this is more of a fun one, and this is more along the lines of, do audiobook, count as reading.
Ah, yeah, because I did a blog about this, didn't I?
It's not...
Oh, no, yeah, I've done 2 blogs that end up being like a rant thing. Yeah.
So this is, can you count it as reading if you're skimming something?
What if you speed read?
I guess, because obviously a lot of reviewers, not a lot, but some reviewers, I think, skim through books to be able to read as many as they do to be able to review them. So
when you say skim, what do you mean?
Like, literally, like, pick out a few bits.
Okay.
Through a few pages. Like, not speed reading, because speed reading you train yourself to kind of take it all in, don't you?
Yeah.
But this is like, literally, like, read that first bit, read the bottom bit, read that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you know what's happened.
Okay.
But you haven't read all the
Absorbed
words.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's like one step up from just reading the Wikipedia article about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that doesn't count as reading.
So what do you think about skimming?
It's not reading.
How? Because, like, you can discuss the plot, I guess, the main plot points. You wouldn't be able to do, like, all the nuances. But could you really discuss, like, how it's written, or the prose, or the world building?
Or the character arc, really.
Yeah.
Because there will be some, like, you know, monologuing thought process maybe at some point, which leads you from point A to point B.
Yeah. And you may not have read it because it wasn't deemed as important when you were, like, skipping through it.
I mean, let's take Akamath as an example. Mm-hmm. There are loads of points where, like, the big plot point is, like, Feyre does a thing. But there is, between that, is a thought process where she's thinking to herself, you know, like, you know that quote of, like, yes, Tamlin had fought for me, but I fought harder and I nearly died. And he, you know, the only time he tried to, you know, the one time he could have got me away, he tried to fuck me. Like, that thought process leads...
I'm so angry about that even now.
We have to make sure we do an ACOTAR spoiler in the description.
Yeah.
You know, and that is what leads her to the next big plot point.
Yeah.
The next big decision she makes.
Or, like, realisation or whatever. Yeah.
Whereas, I think if you just started at point A and moved straight to point B, you're going to miss the nuance of how she got there and the character development that led her there.
Yeah.
And the actions that Rhys took that caused her to reflect that, which caused Rhys from going from the baddie to the goodie.
Yeah.
In Feyre's eyes.
Skimming books reminds me of, like, when I was at school and I had to read something and didn't want to.
Oh, God, yeah, Spark Notes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean, like, that's basically...
Spark Notes, look for the important chapters, go read them.
Yeah, that's basically what I mean by, like, skimming. So,
There's so many times at uni... I'm like a full-on degree. Where they're like, oh my God, you really absorbed the book. And I'm like,
literally read, like, 4 chapters. Come on.
I went on Spark Notes, went on a couple of the sites.
got the gist of it. Yeah, like someone in...
Memorise one quote for you.
Someone in our Discord was asking, like, she was part of a book group and she just didn't want to finish the book. So she was asking, has anyone read it? And I was like, yeah, because I thought she said something library, unwritten library, and I thought Midnight Library. So I was like, yeah, I read that. So then I was messaging her privately and I was like, oh no, wait, I know, I'm thinking of the wrong book. I was like, oh, hang on. And I went on Goodreads, looked up the one star reviews, grabbed a screenshot, and I was like, this tells you everything that happened. She's like, great idea.
Yeah.
But,
like, sometimes I'm like, I keep going through the book because I want to know the ending, but I'm like, I could just Google the ending.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or just skip a few pages. Or, yeah.
Because I need to know how it ends, because this is the way I am.
I mean, there has been times when I'm listening to audiobooks and I'm like, oh, I skipped to three times for a bit.
I don't know how you listen at 2 speed and 3 speed. I tried it and I was like, nah. The fastest I can go to is 1.3.
Oh, really?
It sounds like chipmunks. Past
1.3. 2 is like my normal now.
No,
my go-to.
Past 1.3, it sounds like chipmunks are talking, and I can't stand it, and I can't take it in.
I basically start everything at 1.5 now, and then I listen to like one chapter till I've got to grips with the way the person talks.
Yeah.
So I go to 2.
Oh my god, I don't know how you do it. Because I actually struggle with audiobooks with like, I don't picture it as well as I do with books.
Yeah.
So I actually struggle.
Because you're probably doing other things.
Yeah, I am always multitasking because I'm just going to sit still.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm washing up or hoovering away.
But I really struggled to like, there's a few, especially when I was Red Rising, which was a bit meatier, there was a couple of times where I was like, I need to skip back.
Yeah, I need to go back.
I tuned back in, and he's like, and then the thing exploded, and I'm like,
excuse me, what? But you were like having breakfast a minute ago. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't think I could do it. Just getting up to 1.3 is taking me. Maybe more. I listen to audio because I really only started in the last 3-4 months. Started listening to audiobooks for something other than sleeping. Yeah. Because they just used to be a tool to help me sleep.
Your primary, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas now I've started listening to them like commuting, working, like all sorts of times.
So yeah, I think we're both agreed on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you skim read a book, would you put it on your story graph?
No.
I think I would.
No.
I just wouldn't write a big review on it.
Sometimes I'm like, because I read Fault in Our Stars in 3 hours, which is, it's not a big book, but that's a lot in 3 hours. And sometimes I'm like, can I really, like, how much did I actually digest?
But I think that you're a lot stricter on what you count as, like, I mean, we've just had a discussion last episode about your bedtime audiobooks.
Yeah, so, thinking they don't count. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think that's university, leaving that insecurity in me.
I think what we'll do is, if I remember, I'm going to put in our story, and a little poll, and you need to tell us what you think, because
so should we do a couple that I did on my blog?
She's happy now, but she might just be chatting during this, but it's not cry. So.
We are trying to pause for her.
Yeah, but she's very
talkative
what it is,
at
guys.
the moment.
Right. Yeah.
So I did one about people saying that audiobooks don't count or graphic novels don't count as reading.
Obviously, complete twaddle.
Which is, I mean, it's the...
I'm like, this isn't a great one.
Yeah, well, this is the foundation of the podcast, was all reading is reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, to us, all reading is reading. No matter how you consume literature, you are still consuming it. It's still not, like, a bloody TV screen in your face.
No.
You know what I mean?
So, there's the graphic novel Mouse. I can't remember who wrote it. And there's that graphic novel Persepolis. I can never remember how to pronounce it. And they're both like they're both about history. They're both about like horrible situations that happen IRL. They're still reading. They're just like with illustrations. Yeah.
See, that was one I did a little rant about because I seen a TikTok that made me angry.
I saw
I did one.
She's telling us a story, so she's like, audio.
The one you commented on that I did recently, that because there was a whole discussion on Book Talk of like, if you say you're a reader but you've never read the classics, you don't count.
Like classic skill.
Yeah, and well, that's her. And I at the time I didn't make a TikTok about it because I didn't want to pile on because people really went for this girl unnecessarily.
And she's clearly just pick me, and she'll grow out of that.
You know what I mean? I think there would have been a time at uni where I would have been quite smug about how much classics I read. But that was pressure at uni.
Your trash. So,
unapologetically enjoying my trash. Yeah. But I did do a whole blog that was a big old rant about that one, because I was like, I hate this notion. There was a time, you know, like when I'm telling people that I read nearly 50 books this year, but they were all like, it was all fantasy stuff. And they were like, oh, someone was like, do you not want to read a classic book? And I was like, maybe I just want to enjoy life. Like, and I get more respect for having read all the Jane Austen books than I do for reading 50 books.
Yeah, and as we've been discussing a lot during this episode, diversity matters. And when you look at classics, there's not much diversity. A lot of classic authors were considered trash when they were producing those stories.
Well, it's the argument I had with the particular professor who called Terry Pratchett's fantasy stuff as literature for the masses. I said to him, by your own logic, you would not have read Dickens, because he was published in penny magazines. He wrote for the masses about issues the masses experience, like things in Oliver Twist, the workhouses. All of that was the common working man's experience. So by your own logic, you would not have read those books. Yeah. And he had no answer for that.
Arthur Conan Doyle, like Sherlock, wouldn't have been considered, like, that was a weekly thing that was like in a newspaper or whatever.
Anything that was posted serially would be considered trash.
Oh.
And I sort of put the argument in that blog about, like, I was like, there are certain classic literatures that explore certain aspects of the human experience in quite a beautiful way, and that's why I'm like, that's the only way I can see it being worth arguing that this is a classic to read. But in terms of, like, to educate you, probably not that helpful, unless it's certain other classics, like The Colour Purple is considered a classic. And books like that, you could argue, educationally are very helpful for you to read.
Yeah.
But I just think, if you don't want to read Jane Austen and its fluffy romance books set in, you know, the aristocratic English society of the 1800s, I'm sorry, you're not missing anything by not reading those. Some of them have very beautiful love stories in them, but they are love stories that are retold over and over and over and over. So there is no argument to be made that you're more or less for not having read them. Like, yeah, I just think there's those kind of books, great if you read them, but I don't think you're missing anything.
And you're not a more worthwhile reader for reading them.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're interested in, because there's common themes that Charlotte Bronte used that gets repeated in literature that you'll read to this day that you don't know where it came from. If you're interested in that kind of nerdy shit, read them. Yeah, if you're not, then don't.
Yeah, and the main thing to remember, the main takeaway of all this is that in 50 years' time, Twilight is going to be considered a classic.
Yeah.
So make of that what you will.
It's true. It already is.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of
they will be studying that in school.
They already are. It was in the curriculum when I was leaving uni.
There you go.
Yeah, there are fantasy books that I read as a teenager in the 2010s that are now considered like classic fantasy, classic era fantasy, golden era fantasy, and I'm like, why is part of my childhood now golden era?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Fuck off.
Fast fashion.
Yeah, I think those are the two that I did a bit of an unhinged rant about on my blog.
Yeah, we will link them.
Yeah,
I'll make sure to put them in the link on the card.
You can just, I mean, it's always on the card, the link to my blog. I talk a lot of shit there, actually. Check it out. So
the summing up of today's episode is check out Tony's blog. It's in our card, which is available on everywhere. Mm-hmm. So please follow, like, and subscribe. We're available on Instagram, TikTok, and you can. Oh, we actually have a Facebook. I always forget about that.
We do have a Facebook. I even made us a Facebook group.
And we got LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You can follow us anywhere. We also have our website where you can send us suggestions.
We have, if you have indie authors that you would like to submit, so we mention them in our indie author feature podcast episode.
So please do that, and you can listen to our episodes wherever you listen to your podcast. Please leave us a rating and share with your friends. And also, if you don't have any of the apps to listen to podcasts on, I will say that on our website is the RSS player. So you can actually just log into our website and play the podcast from our website. You don't have to download an app. Or from our YouTube.
You might be on one. This is how you found us. But I'm just saying, if you don't want to do an app, there is also our website as an option. Mm-hmm. I made that on purpose and then told no one.
So thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye. Bye. Love you.